Hey everyone, and welcome to All Things Dating. I have my co-host Jeremiah Brewer with us and our special guest, Suzanna Mathews. Welcome, Suzanna.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise.
We've got a great topic for tonight's discussion. Suzanna, do you want to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure.
Great.
Well, so I am known as the Date Maven. I run a boutique date coaching and matchmaking consultancy, and this summer I get to add author to the title. I have a new book out called Revising Mrs. Robinson. It's an exploration of intergenerational romantic relationships between older women and younger men, and I've kind of used the critical lenses of ageism and sexism to look at that phenomenon.
And when is your book coming out, Suzanna?
Fingers crossed, it should be in about 3 weeks.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to use that as part of our discussion tonight, talking about the generational gap. And one of the things that we had discussed, Suzanna, was basically the differences between dating attitudes and beliefs, and how it affects like the Generation X and millennials. What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so I mean, it can be a little bit tricky. I think that these kinds of pairings are happening more and more, but it can be a little hard for Gen X women who are single and dating millennial men to kind of know how to interpret some of their behavior and some of their attitudes about dating. There's just sort of a different mindset and a different approach, and women in their 40s and their 50s maybe didn't have some of the technologies when they were younger women and first dating that are used on a daily basis now. And so it can be tricky to know, how much of the dating thing escalates through texting and social media and getting it offline and into real life and that sort of thing.
Right, and that's one of the topics that we've covered before is learning to use that technology when it comes to dating and what's acceptable and what most people are frowning upon.
Right.
What are some of the suggestions you can give to people in that situation?
So I think just sort of calling out the elephant in the room is probably a best practice here, saying, hey, listen, I'm 15 years older than you are. I'm 20 years older than you are, or whatever. When I was last dating, Twitter didn't exist and Tinder didn't exist, and people definitely didn't send pictures of their body parts to each other through text message. So just know that you might have to sort of tell me what your expectations are, and I'm going to tell you what my expectations are, and that may not include what a 20-year-old or 25-year-old would do and how she would relate to you. But let's just have an ongoing conversation about this and recognize that the differences are there and they're not insurmountable, and I like you enough to want to get through it.
Good point. Good point. Jeremiah, I know you're sitting there a little quiet. This is an interesting topic for you. Have you had much experience dating outside of your own generation?
Not much. I've dated a couple older women, and I mean older. I say 2 or 3 years, not a drastic amount. I'm not opposed to it. I do believe that a lot of it would depend on where you guys are at in your lives, and if you're even able to relate to each other's challenges and lifestyle and just things that you're going through. But I mean, I'm open to anything. I think it's all possible. I was just talking to a guy earlier today, though, and it just seems you're talking about millennials, and it seems like the attitude behind dating, and maybe I'm kind of old-fashioned, has become so minimalist. Like they do so little. And the funny thing is it works. So I was talking to this guy, and he goes literally, like we were talking about first dates, and Denise, you like the kind of the old-fashioned way of planning a first date and doing something fun and having this thing. And he's like, I don't do any of that. He goes, if I'm interested in a girl, he's like, we just kind of meet for drinks and just kind of let things go from there. And that apparently works for him. So I was kind of, I don't know, kind of torn between, what I was taught and what to do and what works. And I think that has a lot to do with the attitude of the generations and what the expectations are there with them.
Susanna, what have you found are the major differences of the generations?
Well, Jeremiah actually just brought up a really good point. I think a lot of older women, they want to seem like they're modern and they're progressive, and they definitely don't want to be perceived as older by having outdated expectations. But truly, deep down, they really do want to be courted, to use kind of an old-fashioned term. On the one hand, they might desire that experience of a relationship with a younger guy, but at the same time, they're looking for something maybe oftentimes a little more substantial and not just the, hey, let's meet up for drinks and I'm going to give you 5 minutes notice. Like they kind of want more of the respect and the planning and the preparation of being asked on a proper date, if you will. It doesn't mean that, there can't be impromptu, spontaneous things as well. But they really do, it can be confusing for them to know, like, do I have a right to ask for this? Am I allowed to ask for this? And well, sure, absolutely you are. Again, it's all communicating expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, Suzanna, is I actually had a client that preferred dating older women.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for this is because obviously he had done in his past, and he felt that it was a great way to gain knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
He was very attracted to her because of her experiences in life, and wanted to see that in other dating situations. So his preference was to date older. Mm-hmm. Now, do you see that a lot in your matchmaking?
I have virtually no one requesting, other than maybe, some men who were like, oh, sure, I'll date a younger woman. But really female clients aren't coming to me specifically saying, I want you to fix me up with a younger man. Usually those things are happening rather accidentally. And in the same way that you would meet anyone, maybe it's at the gym, in between workouts, maybe it's at a bar, maybe it's even a professional networking kind of a thing. It's just that these two people have their radars sort of tuned to a different frequency, if you will, in that they tend to gravitate more towards the older woman, younger man.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Speaking from personal situations, and I don't cover much of my personal life here, but I will share on this. My first marriage, my husband was 20 years older. Mm-hmm. The relationship that I got into shortly after that marriage ended, he was 9 years younger. And of course, my husband is about the same age as me now. So I can say personally, I've been on both ends of it. Mm-hmm. And the way I approach it in matchmaking is not necessarily defining age by a number, but more about defining it as a lifestyle.
Right.
And so when I'm putting people together and they have that age requirement, it's really my job to determine, is it more of a number or is it more of a lifestyle they're looking for?
I think that's a good outlook. There's that saying, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
Right.
That's from Satchel Paige. And I think that makes a lot of sense because we all know like 40-year-olds who are energetically 60, and we know 60-year-olds who are energetically 40. And so just kind of looking at that vibration that a person has and what is the energy that they bring into the world, and are they traveling and eating out and gardening and reading books and meeting people, or are they kind of committed to their lazy boy recliner and having the TV on by 7 and to bed by 9. So that's really, it is a lifestyle thing that you want to look at.
It is. So what is it that motivates people to date outside of their out range?
It can be a number of different things. For some people, it's just sort of, it's an adventure. I've never tried this before. Maybe someone read about it, heard about it, saw it in a movie or a TV show, and I thought, I wonder what that would be like. So like they want that notch on the belt, so to speak. For other people, it's, again, quite accidental. And this is where a lot of people can kind of get in their own way, trip themselves up by thinking, hey, I never meant to look for this kind of person. I'm not even sure I want to be with this kind of person, but the attraction's there and the compatibility's there. So what do I do? Like, my belief system tells me this is not okay, but my heart tells me this is something that I want.
Well, let's talk about that because you bring up a very interesting thing here. The cultural bias and beliefs how does that fit in? How do you see people reacting to what society says is acceptable?
So it's interesting because even though women have made a lot of strides academically and economically, and for all intents and purposes, are claiming their power and living these progressive roles in society, this is still kind of a way in which sometimes women are holding themselves back, or culture is holding women back. And there's been a lot of stuff going on lately with racial tension, a lot of racial conflict, and it's pretty easy to say, like, hey, this is unfair, or we should have equal opportunities for everyone, or we would never tell someone you're too much the wrong color to date a person, or you're too much this to date a person. But yet people will make comments publicly to their friends and people they care about of, he's too young for you, or you're too old for him, or those kinds of criticisms are still considered socially acceptable, even though we wouldn't make the same comment about race or religion.
Correct. And I see it's more socially acceptable for older men to date younger women than it is for younger women to date older men.
It is. And so I was really curious about that, because there are women who will say, well, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And they were like, if men can date down, I can date down. And I thought, well, why is it that so many people have kind of a ick or yuck, or that's weird, or just sort of a adverse reaction to the older woman, younger man pairing? And so I kind of looked into anthropology, biology, neuroscience, and I thought maybe I'll find the answer there. And I kind of came up with a theory that maybe it sort of has to do with our evolutionary wiring. We are pre-programmed to favor and advantage that which ensures our survival. And so somewhere back in that 2,000 or 5,000-year-old brain, there's that response, that knee-jerk response that says, hey, that pairing isn't biologically advantageous. It doesn't favor reproduction, even though reproduction isn't usually the first thing on our minds now in dating and mating. But there's something in that brain that remembers when we did have to worry about extinction, and we did have to worry about day-to-day survival.
Tell us a little bit more about the research you did in writing your book.
Well, it was interesting because I did both social science research and I did conduct interviews with women across the country to hear their stories, because I really didn't want to just write a book that was only interesting to academics and scholarly types. I wanted a book that would really help women. And I felt like the best way to do that was to pool those stories and allow those stories to be a source of support for women who were thinking about or were in this type of relationship. And it was my privilege to have access to those stories, because it takes a lot sometimes for people to talk about old loves and former relationships and things like that.
Absolutely. I'm going to close out another tab here to kill some of the echoes.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me for a second. Now, I know one of the things I did when we first started talking about this subject, Suzanna, is kind of jotted down a few examples. And I'm sure you've got more of a compiled list than I do, but let's talk about it for a minute, just because you can't resist bringing celebrities into the mix. Of course. So, most famously, you've got the Demi Moore.
Of course.
And then, of course, you have, let's see, I wrote down the Tina Turner. Mm-hmm. What are some that you've kind of looked at in preparation for these things?
Well, kind of a hot celebrity right now in terms of just a lot of exposure. Kris Jenner, her boyfriend, Corey Gamble, is significantly younger. Mm-hmm. I think Madonna was probably one of the original cougars.
Yeah.
Certainly has, I think, had a handful. Even Heidi Klum had a younger boyfriend for a little while. Lisa Bonet. There are quite a few celebrities I actually mentioned in my book. And then, of course, you could take that even further and look at the movie roles and TV roles where there's an older woman, younger man pairing.
Right. So we're only seeing this right now starting to become more acceptable, I would say, because of these examples. And because of these movies, I think that has a lot to do with what culture and society dictates is acceptable.
I think it often does. I was also curious, though, to ask women, if you're looking at a movie star or a pop star or a supermodel, to what degree are you actually able to relate to that person? I mean, it's one thing for someone who's like total Hollywood, Demi Moore, Madonna, and they have all this money and access to things that will prolong their youth and their beauty. And so it's one thing for them, but it might be another thing for a woman in Oklahoma or Colorado or Arizona to say, is this okay for me too?
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that brings to mind is, why is it so essential for someone who is dating against the norm to be in a regular and strong mindset? Let's talk about that mindset to be able to have these types of relationships that will actually last.
Yeah. Well, I think anytime you're in a relationship that could be marginalized, there are going to be people, and even people who mean well, who say things that are insensitive, or they don't realize maybe how sensitive their audience is to their comments. I interviewed one woman who got really upset when her boyfriend's family, she was the older woman, he was the younger man, her boyfriend's family would make jabs at him and call him a cub and say things that were kind of emasculating to him and treated him like he was sort of a juvenile and not capable of making his own grown-up choices in life. And she would get a little defensive about that and even try to turn they weren't attacking, but it was kind of poking fun and try to turn that back to herself. Like, hey, if you're going to make fun of anyone, call me a cougar, call me a MILF, but leave him alone.
Right. I think the mindset is very important.
That's a good topic if I can kind of interject for a second, because the whole time you're talking, I was thinking, and you may not agree, but do you think that the age difference with the woman being older than the male inhibits the male's ability to be the leader and the head of the household in a relationship later on down the line? See, I see that it's more natural, quote, for an older male with a younger woman, because that male is already going to have a natural inclination and instinct to lead and be that strong, male support. But I wonder how much of a challenge it is when it's reversed,
yeah.
And not saying that it's not able to happen, but I feel like that could be a bit of a challenge, especially we already know that women are more mature than men are at the same age. So when you have an older woman, the mentalities have to be different. There's no big secret there.
Right.
So,
you have a good point. So men in their 20s are often still trying to find themselves and figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And they may not be ready to take on that protector provider role. And I'm speaking in very traditional terms, but they may not be ready to sort of think about career and family and things like that. But at the same time, it takes masculine, feminine polarity for there to be attraction, right? There has to be that yin and that yang. And so if the female is taking on too strong or too dominant of a role, being the boss lady essentially in the relationship, well, then it can be emasculating, and it can make it kind of tricky for the guy in future relationships to really know how to show up in his full masculine strength.
Right.
And I think that's a really good point, Suzanna, because when you're talking about having that masculine and feminine energy and that being balanced and showing the polarity of it, that goes for any age group, no matter who you're dating or whatever age. So, addressing it in the point of age differences, I think in order for the man to take that role of being, let's say they're married and he wants to be viewed as head of the household, he has to be able to step up and take that role, and she has to be able to allow him to.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to open this up for discussion. So I know there's a couple of people out there watching. If you'd like to join in and have a question or want to join the conversation, please feel free to jump in at any point in time. Suzanna, we had discussed a couple of different things, and I'm trying to look over here at my notes, but what other parts of this did you want to really bring home tonight? What's important for us to understand about this discussion?
Well, there's so many facets, and I don't want to bore anyone with scholarship, but it really does encourage us to look at ageism and ageist attitudes in our culture. It's pretty acceptable for people to make ageist comments that would devalue the aging individual, male or female, but especially female. If you really look at like all the negative terms that exist for an older woman in our culture, and language is important. It not only reflects kind of our values and our beliefs, but it recreates those, it perpetuates those values and beliefs for the next generation. So I think people can be careful if they really truly want to be progressive and they really truly want to be supportive of other people's relationships and our right to happiness and love. Be aware of your own language. And if you're using language that is ageist in nature, you might want to kind of check yourself on that. And likewise, if you're using language that is sexist in nature or that belies assumptions about what women's roles are or should be, that's probably not a very empowering place either. So I dove into both of those big isms, and I'm using my air quotes a lot here, in this book.
Well, I love it though. I mean, it's
we kind of got cut off. You were talking about languages. Was there something specifically that you were kind of focused on? Can you give us like what you're talking about when it comes to the languages?
Well, even the words cougar or cub. So I kind of had to make my peace eventually with the word cougar. When I started out, I wanted to know who coined this phrase. Like, where did this word come from? Who decided that this is the word we're going to call older women who date younger men? Was it meant to be positive? Was it meant to be negative? And I think it just kind of stuck because of the way it sounds, the way the R sort of rolls off in a hard way. But I couldn't really determine that in any of the women I interviewed, there was nothing predatory going on. And there's that suggestion a little bit with the word cougar. But I also realized, hey, as a writer, I can't keep writing and saying the words intergenerational romantic relationship like over and over and over because it's just not elegant, it's clunky. And so I finally said, okay, I'm going to use this word and here's why. I'm just choosing it because it's short and memorable and to the point. But that would be an example.
That makes sense. Yeah. So is it, are you personally offended by that word?
I'm not personally, but many of the women I interviewed were, because they felt that it kind of took something and made it small, or that it was a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of who they were in their relationship.
No, it's funny because I can't think of anything that is the same word for men.
Yeah, there really isn't. If it's an older man dating a younger woman, we might call him a silver fox, but that's pretty generic. And, the younger man in the equation, some people call him a cub, but they're not babies. They don't need to be taken care of usually. There is a chapter in the book where we talk a little bit about that, about the guy who is looking for more of a nurturing or motherly partner, and that's a different motivation. But
so tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. What is it that you think that typically attracts the younger guys to the older women? I'm kind of curious because I have my own kind of thoughts and concepts on this, but I'm sure you actually have proven theorism behind it. So
probably the public assumption is that it's all about sex. I imagine that's probably what you're thinking, is like it's just kind of an immediate sexually gratifying situation. And that is true in some cases. And my research indicated that women in middle aged are experiencing an increase in their sexual desire. It's kind of a joke or a trick that nature plays on middle-aged women, that as ability to procreate declines, sort of sexual interest increases or ramps up. Not quite sure why that is. So that's part of the attraction for some. I heard stories from women where they had been in relationships with men who needed a great deal of caretaking, same-aged men or older men who maybe were more homebound or just kind of slowing down in life. And these women felt a little bit stifled and bound by that their partners weren't able to go out and do things and enjoy things. And so then after that relationship ended, they were interested in a younger partner who had a little more vim and vigor in life.
Yeah. Actually, I wasn't thinking about the physical aspect. In my own personal experience, I actually thoroughly enjoy conversating and socializing with older women. And for me, it's because there's probably no other group that's more transparent than older women. They say what's on their mind. They know themselves. They're secure in their own skin for the most part.
Less game playing sometimes.
What's that?
Less game playing was something a lot of men told me. That women aren't.
There's no games. What you see is what you get, and also very willing to just kind of go with the flow. They're not afraid to do anything. They just want to hang out and socialize, and I find it pretty refreshing, actually. So I was just kind of figuring what you thought. I think Denise is stuck off for some reason. But yeah, I don't.
He's frozen. Nope. Wait. Oh.
Yeah, she just went away. I think she'll try to come back on. To say what else here.
So yeah, one of the things that kind of came up too that's related to that. Oh, here she's coming back on. Hi.
Hey there. I didn't miss you guys, but I understand you couldn't see me. I was locked out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't miss anything.
Great.
But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. One of the things that we kind of discuss a little bit in the book is how to sort of come out to people with this kind of relationship. And it's going to be different for everybody. And it's also going to depend on a woman's family and her peer group and her work situation. But I talk to women who are really, really reluctant to bring the relationship into the public eye amongst their coworkers because they maybe had a high status job. They were responsible for entertaining clients and producing a lot for their companies. And they thought, how will my peers at work view me? Will they see me as less competent, less responsible? Just will they see me in a different way? And it took some time, maybe longer than it would have with a traditional relationship, to kind of bring that younger man into her work life in that way, and sometimes family life as well.
What are some of the tips or advice that you would give a woman in that situation to be able to be out in the open with that type of a relationship?
Yeah. Well, I think thinking about who am I and what do I want, that's always a good place to start from. And when I'm coaching someone or working as their matchmaker, I always start with that question. Who are you and what's your outcome here? And I think it was Jesse Jackson who made a comment about the best way to fight any kind of ism, whether it's racism or sexism or whatever, is simply to be excellent. And in being excellent, being who you are and being authentic and just doing you, as they say, is one of the best ways to sort of show people over time, there's nothing here to look at, folks. There's nothing here to criticize, nothing here to comment on. Just be excellent.
That's a great point. And Jeremiah, was there anything from your notes that you wanted to bring into the discussion?
No, not really. I was just kind of coming up with stuff off the top of my head while you disappeared. So,
if there are any people, are the people who are listening, are they able to post a comment or a question?
Yep, we can look. Yeah. We can view comments over there on the right-hand side. So if anyone has a comment or question they want to post, and also if they want to join in on video, you're more than welcome to hop in a seat. Just go ahead and hover over the box until you see the purple circle, and you can join the conversation directly.
I'd be curious to know if anyone who's listening is either currently in or has in the past been in an intergenerational romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm. And see, it's funny, it's, a very interesting topic, Suzanna, because as a matchmaker, I don't really, like you said, don't really see that much as far as women requesting to date younger men. So, it's an interesting topic for me because I've done it from both older men to younger, so I have that personal experience, but I don't see much request for it when it comes to the actual matchmaking process. Whereas with men, it's extremely different. Yeah. Most men in their 40s and 50s tend to want to date women a little bit younger.
Right. Well, there are dating sites and social discovery apps that specialize in the older woman, younger man pairing. And so I think people can find that pretty easily with like Cougar Life and older woman dating and things like that.
And one of the things that I recommend to my clients is that they do give me a very open and broad age range, meaning if you can give me from 10 years younger to 10 years older, we're going to have a lot more choices for you. And so I think that that's a good thing to point out, because it does create more opportunities for you to meet a variety of different people, not just basically sticking within a 5-year range of age.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And reminding people that, you know, flirting is flirting. And, you know, sometimes they'll say, okay, am I reading into this situation? Am I imagining that they're flirting with me? Is this all in my head? What's going on here? And sometimes there's a little bit of a generation gap around that too. Like, this can't be happening. He can't be attracted to me. There's no way. But, you know, flirting is flirting. And all the cues and the signs that you would read from someone similarly aged are going to be there with someone who's younger or older.
You know, and it's funny when you mention that, the thought that comes to my mind is some of the older men. When I say older, I mean like in their 60s and 70s, but they just do not hesitate one bit to put it all out there and flirt with absolutely any woman of any age.
Right.
You know, and you don't see that as much with women. You know, the women are a little bit more reserved, you know. And so it's very interesting to watch. And as we grow in society and it becomes more acceptable, I'll be curious to see if the women start being a little bit more bold and putting themselves out there.
Quite possibly. There was, you remember the show Cougar Town when that was on TV?
Yes, it's one of my favorites.
I'm trying to find this quote that I have. I'm sorry, give me just a second here because I had jotted it down. There's a conversation going on between Jules and Grayson, I think was his name. I'm sorry, I don't have it committed. She says to him, you know, I've seen the parade of girls that you bring to your house, and you bring them home and you tag them and you release them. And no matter how young they are, you never seem the least bit self-conscious about your age. And he says, it's because I'm not. And she says, show me how to do that. And he goes, can't. When women get older, it's icky. When men get older, it's adorable. It's my favorite double standard. And she goes, not so much. So, I mean, it's in the context of comedy, but it's truth. It's truth embedded in comedy. That's really how our culture sees it.
Absolutely. Clarissa, if you want to jump in, I know this is probably a topic that you would be extremely interested, being a behavioral scientist. Feel free to jump in and join the conversation at any time. But you see that a lot in TV and romantic comedies, and it's a good thing to point out because that really is one of the things that does help to make it more acceptable in society.
There was a show that premiered on the CW, I think last summer, called Significant Mother. I don't think it got a lot of press, but it was based on that premise of the two main male characters were really close friends and had grown up together, and one of them started dating. Krista Allen played the role of the mother.
Yep. So what is it that we can do or advise people to do to kind of be more open to these arrangements? You know, how can we as matchmakers give them more options with that 10 years older to 10 years younger, both men and women? You know, what is your advice to help open people up in that ageism?
I think narrative really speaks to people. So being able to tell stories, either from our friends or our clients, but those success stories of, hey, I worked with a client who really believed this, but then we talked about this, and then pretty soon her journey took her here, and now she's happy doing da-da-da-da-da. So just being able to relate those stories of, hey, I've worked with people just like you, and they had concerns and fears and frustrations just like you, and now they're over here with this person who they never would have considered. And you know, it's common for matchmakers to say sometimes the most wonderful person shows up in the package you least expect, right? I say that all the time to people, and I'm thinking you probably do too. And that might mean any number of things. It might mean age. It might mean white collar and blue collar working, you know, they're matching up. It might mean all kinds of things.
Well, I'll give you a story to put on it. When I was in my late 20s, and going into a relationship with my first husband, when I first met him, I couldn't stand him, despised him. And who would have ever thought that I would have ended up marrying a short, aging, somewhat balding, 20-year older than myself man? And, so that it comes in different packages is true. And you can't judge a book by its cover, because there are other factors in attraction other than just physical attraction and initial first impressions. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to be able to get past that and really get to know a person before making those judgment calls and decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And people seem sometimes so reluctant to ask those kinds of questions in early stage dating. It's very easy to get swept up in the limerence and the like, oh my gosh, the attraction's so thick, I can hardly stand it. And there's, rainbows and butterflies and all that. And people kind of forget to have those conversations that will really tell them, do we have the substance here to go longer than 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or what have you? And is there more than just kind of that tingly feeling inside that we can build something on?
Mm-hmm. What are some of the questions that you can give us for an example?
Well, I always encourage people, even though it sounds a little, like intense, but at some point you have to find the time to talk about money. Because if you have an older woman and a younger man in a relationship, chances are she's farther along in her career. She's probably earning more. She's more established. Depending on whether he's been to college or not, what kind of job he's in, he may still be kind of trying to figure out the whole, working multiple jobs to pay off student loans, or, he's going to be living a little bit of a different lifestyle probably than she is. And so figuring out a way to sort of meet in the middle. Maybe we don't have to go to 5-star restaurants every weekend. We can have some picnics on the living room floor, or maybe he pays for the dates in the first 3 months of dating. And then once we've established ourselves as a couple, then we can share and go back and forth a little bit. Those are the kinds of things that are so hard to talk about, but so essential.
Well, and there are issues that, if they're not addressed, present problems as the relationship progresses.
Right.
And that's with any relationship in any age group.
Obviously, the decision about family is a big one. The topic of having kids is a big one for these couples. And I talked to more than one man or woman who said this relationship would have gone on, it would have persisted if we hadn't gotten to the point where he realized, I really want to settle down and have a family. And she's done with that. She's not at that stage in life, or maybe biologically can't anymore. And that was really painful for them. But they realized, this is this man's dream. He wants to be a father. So this is where it ends.
Mm-hmm. I can see where that would be a major issue in certain situations.
Yeah. And then in other situations, there were women who were willing to either try, or men who were willing to say, okay, your kids, even though they're from a different father, I will integrate into their lives and love them and support them. And they were able to work it out. So it goes.
Right. That makes sense. I think it's just a matter of really being open and upfront in the beginning of a relationship and being clear with intentions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And most people, you've probably observed this, they're dating in a pretty random and haphazard way. They're just kind of like falling into situations, and they're not really thinking about, I talk to people a lot about envisioning their ideal boyfriend or ideal husband avatar, just like you would if you're in marketing. Who's my ideal client? Only who's my ideal spouse or partner? And what am I being the kind of person who's going to attract that person?
Right. And that's a good point too, is, we only attract what we are. Mm-hmm. And so focusing on yourself and growing and learning as a person, and really making sure that you have all of the qualities that you're looking for in another person, that you can offer the same qualities, is so very important. Because in order to present the best version of your authentic self, you need to first define your authentic self and actually be transparent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the stuff that's so much more important than, hey, I grew up listening to this band and you don't even know who they are because you're from a different generation. Or I grew up watching this show on TV and you've never even heard of it because you're younger than me. And that can be a little mildly frustrating in early stage dating, but ultimately that's not what's going to determine your longevity in your relationship. Did you love the same bands? Did you go to the same concerts? It's lifestyle stuff you can have fun with, but there's so much more.
Right. And I hear that a lot, as far as dating outside of your own generation. Well, what am I going to do to create interest? What am I going to do to have that conversation? And here comes Clarissa. She's going to join us for a minute.
Oh, cool.
Hi, Clarissa.
Hi, ladies. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi.
Hey,
Jeremiah. Sorry.
Jeremiah. Now, you've got the most fabulous job, Clarissa. I've seen a couple of your blabs before. So do you want to just introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you?
Thank you. So I'm a behavioral scientist, researcher, and clinician, and I am the author of a very tongue-in-cheek blog called You'reJustADumbass.com.
I love it.
And on the blog, the boring side of it is that it's really cognitive behavioral techniques that I designed throughout the course of my career, and I just re-engineered it to be very edgy and very, in your face, kind of stop doing dumb crap. If you tell me you want to have a healthy relationship, but you're doing some shit,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. So the blog is just a lot of different. It spans through, different cycles that I've gone through too. It's like from when I was single and, all the way up until like I recently got engaged and, trying to plan a wedding and try to figure out all these like things. And I'm in my 40s. So it's, you know what I mean? It's been a fun little adventure with the blog and everything I've been doing. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to see that this topic was on tonight because I haven't been on Blab for a while. And I was glad to see that it's starting to pick up again. I recently had the honor, listen to this, Huffington Post contributor.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, so now I'm planning on doing some live research with Blab and Google Hangouts. So we'll see how that goes. But it's exciting.
Good. So what are your thoughts on our topic tonight, talking about the ageism and dating cross-generational?
What's funny is tomorrow I'm going to be doing research on benching and ghosting because these topics, right? So these topics show up a lot for the millennials, and I'd like to explore them occurring in 30 plus. Because I think that there is a huge difference in how we relate to one another and why people aren't writing articles on 30s and 40s and their dating behaviors and their dating etiquettes is beyond me. Mm-hmm. So I'm just gonna do it myself.
Good for you. Good for you. I think we all need that because, there is so much information out there for people who are in their 20s and dating and whatnot. But once you get to be our age, mid 40s and whatnot, we're kind of stuck with what society dictates. And there's really not too many people advising on how to date in our generation. And so I think it's great that you're going to jump right into that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Clarissa, in your research and the stuff that you've done in the past, do you see a lot of cross-generational dating going on, or is it just more that you see a lot of the younger people using this platform and others?
Well, there's a few things. Well, I'm from New York, so we get the full gamut in New York, right? So there's a lot of people that, last first date, I want to talk to you later. I love it. Right, it's about benching for 40 plus.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's the interesting thing, right? All these concepts that are coming out are really the same things that have always been happening in dating, whether they're 20s or 30s or 40s. It just depends on the decade that you're in and where you are at your own point. ghosting. Okay, that's a very rude way to just that's blowing somebody off. Like, why do we gotta call it? It's blowing somebody off. Why are we calling it ghosting? Like,
right? Where's your manners?
And
and benching. Okay, that's stringing people on. Let's call it what it is. That's just stringing people on. I think the
Or
difference
gaslighting.
I think the difference is now in women getting higher education at higher rates than prior is changing a lot of what their selection and even their own sense of self-worth, because they don't think that their options are tied to a man financially now, right? And even parenting, it's the idea of single mom is not that little bowl haircut, soccer going, or toting around 7 kids in a shopping cart, trying to like regulate all of them. That's not the image anymore. Everybody's like working out. Everybody's hot. Everybody's 30s and 40s looking like they're 20. Like, sometimes we look better than the kids in their 20s. I hate to say it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of things that are shifting us, but purely on like vain and superficial levels, because we are in an age of vanity. We are in an age of hey, look at me, Facebook, look at my food, look at me, Twitter. Like, look at me in my bathing suit in Aruba, right? Like, normally that would have been shared with you and your partner and maybe your kids, and now it's public domain. It's we're all kind of a brand in and of itself. People want to see what we're doing. People want to put up with what they're up to, and that creates more attractiveness. That creates higher social desirability. That creates more desirability. So, I all of these shifts are occurring, and why wouldn't they? You know what I mean? A lot of what was associated previously just isn't any longer. I mean, even dads are shifting. Fathers and men are shifting. I've never met more men that are like, I'm happy being the house husband. I'm like, what? Really? Okay. And they're just like, I don't want the hassle of, okay, I'm at 120 hours and I never saw my kid. I saw my kid once till they were 25. You know what I mean? So a lot of our roles are shifting. So all of it could be explained by sociological shifts. And the differences in how we're interacting is a totally different thing, because that's a shorter period of what's happening, right? That's just because of social networks. But anyway, guys, I talk a lot, so you could always just cut me off.
I love it, Carissa.
Interesting.
It is. But no, I mean, a lot of the points that you're making are very relevant to what we were talking about today with Suzanna, because these are some of the things that people are doing and using to make it more socially acceptable, I should say, for some of these older women to be dating younger men.
I have a friend who has been doing exclusive research and has written several books. When you can, you have to go look up Susan.
Oh, and yeah, I talked to her.
I love her.
She was one of my sources.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. She's lovely. She's energetic, and she was talking about this trend when it wasn't a trend. Mm-hmm. And she was living this life.
She was walking the walk. And
right.
Hers was the first book I picked up, and really any of the books that I think have been written since hers just haven't met that level. I mean, the quality isn't there. And so I reached out to her, and I just felt she was so generous with me, so kind and so accommodating. So she gets a lot of credit for inspiring me.
Yeah, she truly.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, Clarissa, you'll have to join us on some of our other blogs that we do, talking about all things dating and relationships.
Is Andy still around? Is she going to join us in a video?
Yay. I'm going to circle all of you guys. Jeremiah, I so want to hear you. I didn't mean to be like a hog.
Oh, you're fine.
But I'll
Thanks
be on
for
the
jumping
sidelines.
in. Thank you for jumping in. Good to see you.
Thank you. So nice seeing you too. It's Suzanna, Jeremiah.
Oh, thanks. Good to meet you, Clarissa.
Nice meeting you. Have a good night.
You too. I was hoping to get Sandy to jump in with us, but she says she's just finishing her dinner. But Sandy actually works with a lot of women who are over the age of 40 and kind of guides them in the dating process as well. So here she is. Let's let Sandy in.
Hey.
We're interrupting your dinner, aren't we?
No, it's okay. I was like doing dishes, eating dinner, and listening to this great conversation. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Sandy, do you want to introduce yourself to those who don't know you?
Sure. Sandy Weiner. I am the founder of Last First Date. I'm a dating coach for women over 40, and I specialize in helping them be the women of value that they are in every other part of their lives, and to communicate in an empowered way. So I'm a communication specialist, and Suzanna and I met at some conferences, I think more than one.
The last time we saw each other, we were doing Zumba. Do you remember that? Do you remember doing Zumba together?
Oh, Zumba. Do it. So this is such a great conversation. Pretty much every woman who hires me thinks that every man their age is looking for a woman much younger, and it says that in a lot of profiles. And so what I suggest is that it's really okay to dream. Like, it's okay for them to dream about their fantasy woman, but if you value yourself, just ignore all the preferences and just write to these guys. Because, geographically, it's the same issue. I'm going to run out of battery. Because it's the last boyfriend I had lived, I lived outside of his geographic preferences. I was probably 10 years older than his age range. And he wrote me back immediately. So, it's age to me is a number. It doesn't really matter. I can understand the appeal, and a lot of the things that you said make perfect sense. We lost our hosts.
Oh, let me try and refresh here.
Do you see that? Oh, okay.
Have a good day.
Oh, Suzanna went up.
I got bumped up.
Where's everybody?
We got audio.
Sandy, do you find women are open-minded to the idea of expanding their preferred age range, or do you kind of have to talk them into a little bit and twist the...
I have to talk them into expanding a lot of things, and how they think about most things. It's so much of being a dating coach and a matchmaker is about perspective shifts. And just seeing people differently, seeing yourself differently, seeing dating differently. So it's, once you start busting all the limiting beliefs, dating becomes a much more open field. And like you said, Denise, 10 years over, 10 years under. It's not, age is so irrelevant after a certain point.
I think so.
Especially
and I think
if we're older.
If we limit ourselves to a certain age group, we're just crossing off the chances of meeting some really fabulous people. Yeah, but the way I view age, Sandy, I'm sure you were probably listening earlier on, is it's more of a lifestyle than a number.
Yeah, and I tell people to look at worldview over interests that we share, because the people definitely, I think it was you, Suzanna, who was talking about common interests, and that's how we used to bond when we were younger. We both love the same bands, and it's very shallow, and it's really the opposite of the way we should be dating, which is the common way of seeing the world. And what I've realized, because I'm dating for about 8 years now since my divorce, actually about 6 years. And And it's a refinement process. You know, I learned more about myself with each man, and I learned about what's a real must-have. And to me, the must-haves, when somebody says they're open-minded, that's at the top of my list, because I cannot take rigidity and polarizing and biases and prejudice, and especially now with the culture of what's been going on in the world. You know, there's no room in my life for people who are just putting everybody down to make themselves feel better about themselves. So I think that's, you know, you have to know what's that really important thing, and then all the lines blur. I mean, you know, the best couples that I know are seemingly mismatched, but they are perfect for each other. And so they were able to see beyond the external. And I have a client who's with this amazing, amazing man who is so different from her. And her sister and I were working together at one point, and she said to me, I would never date a man like my sister's boyfriend. And I said, well, I'm sorry that you won't, because he's an amazing guy. And what she was looking for was socioeconomic level. He had to be wealthy. He had to, you know, a checklist of qualities, but his character, you know, and so she consistently attracted narcissists and people who treated her poorly.
Nothing like dating and relationships,
you know,
to bring up our own insecurities and our own self-doubts and our own, expose the places where we're broken.
Yeah.
And it's either an opportunity to repair it and heal it, or to be driven mad by it. So in the intergenerational context, one woman I interviewed felt fabulous and confident and sexy, and, you know, like aging was not even on her radar. And then when she entered into that relationship with a younger man, suddenly she confessed to me, like, I'm kind of staring in the mirror more, and I'm like checking for every little gray hair or wrinkle or pucker or whatever. And it kind of heightened her own radar to her own aging. And she said, I'm not ready for it. I can't deal with it. It makes me more self-aware. And I, before this happened, I felt great about myself, and now I don't. And it really is a mind game for her. For her, that's an opportunity to look at really her self-worth and her own sense of value and where it comes from and what sustains it, and then bring herself with her vulnerability and her honest emotion into a relationship and heal that.
But I think all of it really starts with the ability to be vulnerable and transparent. And unless you're that way with yourself, you cannot fully function in a relationship or dating environment. So it's allowing yourself and giving yourself the permission to be vulnerable. And then the transparency comes in, because you have to be able to express who you are in order to find someone with the qualities that you have to offer.
Yeah, and that's really what I teach women in terms of the communication skills, because it's amazing when they just, you know, you talked before about the honest communication about money. I just recently connected with a man, and he talked to me about money on the second phone call. He just wanted me to know where he stood, not the whole picture, but basically that he had a lot of money at some point in his life. He lost a lot during his divorce, and he wasn't complaining. He wasn't a victim, but he wanted me to know that he was going to travel 5 hours to see me, but he couldn't stay in like a $300 a night hotel. You know, he was sort of setting it up so that I would have the proper expectation for when I met him. And I appreciated that. And my clients are asking questions. Like, I had a client recently who dated a guy who was really not present on the date. And she confronted him when he asked her out again. She said, listen, you were not present, and I really need somebody who's present. He said, I apologize. I had a hangover. I mean, he said, you deserve better. And he wanted to rise up and do better. So that would never have happened if she didn't say what she had to say, because she could have written him off. She could have just said, this guy's a jerk. So that's what it's about. You know, be upfront, be honest, but be kind, set boundaries. And, and I think also look at your friendship base, when it comes to ageism, because I have always had a wide range of friendships that range from every age, every size, every color, because I don't see those as obstacles. And I think if you can do that in your friendships, you can probably
in
do it more
addition to
easily
that,
in your
Sandy,
dating life.
if I can add to it, is allowing yourself to have those types of friendships and to develop them into strong friendships also gives you more opportunity to get to know if there's going to be an attraction that develops. And a lot of times what I find is that someone may be looking for another person to share their life with, and that person could be right under their nose and they don't even know it.
Yep. That happens a lot. They're like, oh, wow, there's attraction here.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us, Sandy. I didn't mean to interrupt your dinner, but I saw you sitting over in the background. I said, come on and say hello.
No. I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
We'll have to bring
with
Jeremiah, and I will have to bring you on one just for your topic. I think it would be a great thing. Thanks, Sandy.
That would be fun.
And
Thank
Suzanna?
All right, good luck.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Susanna, is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with? Any other points or tips or good advice you can give? I mean, I know we've spent a good amount of time on your topic, but I think it's very much worthwhile.
Well, thank you. And there's a lot of information. It's 240 pages worth of info to try to squeeze into an hour. But I would just let people know that if you find yourself in feeling at all challenged by an intergenerational romantic relationship, allow yourself to be supported. Just know that you don't have to figure it all out on your own. I was talking to a group of entrepreneurs and business leaders today, and I told them one of the number one things that I thought entrepreneurship and dating had in common were it's good to have a team. It's good to have a support system and people who are there who have your back and want the best for you and have strengths that you maybe don't have and can help you with your weaknesses. And that's what we as dating coaches do, right?
Of course.
We buoy people up and we sort of help them to achieve the goals that they've set for themselves for love and romance and relationships. So I'm here to do that for intergenerational couples, certainly, and for women and men of all ages. And I just really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share this topic that I'm passionate about.
Oh, we were so glad to have you. And I think it's something that, for a long time has been considered taboo. So I'm really glad to be able to bring this out on such an open platform for discussion.
Yes.
So,
well, I applaud you for that.
Well, thanks, Suzanna. And again, your book should be coming out hopefully July 29th, if I'm correct.
Fingers crossed. We've had a few little hurdles along the way, so we're just going to keep trying to leap over those hurdles in July 29th.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple of links up as soon as we're done so that people can get in touch with you via your website. And of course, you can find Suzanna on Twitter at the Date Maven. And basically from her website, you'll be able to gather all of her contact information. So I'll throw a few links up to reach Suzanna and myself. Jeremiah, of course, thank you for being a fabulous co-host. And we hope to see you guys in a few weeks.
All right.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.